it finally just got to the point that I just had it. This was almost beginning to start feeling like sabotage, the pressure that we were under. And we were at a big banquet. It was some big awards thing, the banquet, I remember. We were sitting at the same table. And she ended up, we were sitting at the same table. She was 2 people away from me. And again, just with where I was at that time, think of the father ticked off that his son made it on time. You know, you've already got in your mind, you've played this out, what needs to be said and done. And because I played it out in my mind, I've already seen her response to it as well. That's made me even more angry, and I played it back. And you know how that can happen, how we do that? We create a reality, and it's so strong and palpable that we actually emotionally respond to it. It's strange, it's powerful. Anyway, I was about to lean over to her. There was a lull in the conversation. Some people were kind of turned around and looking the other way. I was about to lean over and say, "What's going on? Whatever happened, you're really damaging this company, not just my department, the company." And I was about to launch into this, but right before I did that, an individual that was next to her just turned over and said, "Hey, so tell me, how did the latest surgery go?" All right, so I paused, right? It's one of the good things I did this year's World Investor thing. I paused, and I listened for a minute. Turns out it was about the 4th or 5th in a series of serious operations and surgeries that she was going through. But because of some of the attributes and things she knew, the company couldn't afford to have her completely gone during that period of time. And she said, "I'm willing to do it, but I'm going to be dropping the ball from time to time." She said, "It's okay, we need you to do this." And they put her in this position. These serious, some of these were life-threatening surgeries. Some of these, there were moments where there was questions of whether or not she would actually regain use of her legs and some other things that were going on there. Now, in that moment, just in that instant, that had been building for months and months and months. And in my mind, I knew exactly who was right, who was wrong. That conflict we were in was so crystal clear and obvious to anybody. I could explain that to anybody, they would immediately see my side and be on my side. And yet in an instant, everything changed. Why? Empathy, outward mindset, you're all right. At that moment, I suddenly became acquainted with something in her outside triangle that I had never made the effort. I had never had the remotest bit of curiosity to learn anything about her outside triangle. And in that moment, thankfully, there was a dynamic that made me aware of something in her outside triangle. The pressures, the constraints, the stresses, the anxiety that she is under. And suddenly, if somebody were to have come to me before that banquet and said, "Dave, you got to learn to just let it go and just move on and not be so," I would have never had the willpower, been able to think my way out of that. I couldn't. I was a slave to that collusion. I was a slave to that box that I was in. And yet the simple act of learning something about her outside triangle instantaneously thawed that wall, okay? Thawed the relationship entirely and changed it. And suddenly, because I saw her in an entirely different light by understanding that outside triangle, overnight, I didn't say anything to her the rest of the night. I will say, to my younger self's credit, I did end up going back into her the next day and say, "I just have to apologize. This is what I've been thinking this whole time, and I'm sure I put off a vibe that," and she's just, you know, in some ways I wanted her to say, "Yes, you have," because that would have helped. But she said, "You know what? I haven't noticed it. I've just been so busy. I'm sure that everybody's just been tired of me and not getting the job done." And then, of course, I'm feeling even worse. It's like, oh my gosh, what can I do to help? And again, that naturally happens. You begin to learn about somebody's outside triangles. There's something in us that naturally wants to begin to help. Everything changes. And suddenly, with a few short conversations, an efficiency level went right back up. See, it had nothing to do with protocols and knowledge and brain power and skill set. It had to do with my complete lack of awareness of her outside triangle and putting myself in collusion because she might not even know we were involved. Okay? I want to wrap today up by watching a video here and then some invitations. And then we'll conclude today, okay? So this invitation, or I'm sorry, this video, this is Brian, who's director of Citrix. Brian actually just went through, he's talking as if he's one of you, he just went through this first day. And these things are kind of just weighing on him, and he's just reflecting. And he's got this invitation to go out and to do something different. Inject a new dynamic in his relationship, do that thing we were just talking about. And I just want you to see how it plays out, and then we'll spend some time on some invitations, okay? All right, we're ready to go.
All right.
Yes, excellent.
And we're given assignments to process in class. And we took a break, and I thought, you know what, this is kind of hard, but if I don't do something right now, why bother? So part of making things better was to evaluate myself. If I had an issue with another person or in a project, to take a look at what my part was in this. And there was a project that I was working with somebody on that an email had just come through. And we've been negotiating this project. And so they were going to do something that I didn't want to happen. I disagreed with this. This person had a team that I'd also been working with, and I found out later that they were fully expecting me to come into the office guns blazing, and they were battening down the hatches. Not that I'm that kind of person, but they were expecting something to happen. It was lunchtime. It was our lunch break. I thought, okay, I'm going to take care of some business right now and apply what I've learned immediately. He was in a conference room, and it happened to be he was having lunch with his staff. I was expecting, a private conversation. So I thought, I looked at him and I thought, I'm just going to do this right now with the people in the room. And I sat down and said, you know what? I have something I want to talk to you about. And I could feel them cringe. I could see them from my eyes, see their shoulders go up to their ears. They said, you know what? We've been working on this stuff for a long time, and I know it's been difficult, but I want to tell you what I think my part has been in this problem. That I haven't been thinking about what you have to take care of, the responsibilities that you have, the burden that you have to deal with, the other people that you have to make happy. It's a big organization, you have a big responsibility, and I think I've been a pain in the ass for you guys. Frankly, I want to apologize for my behavior. I just want to move forward here, but I do understand my behavior has been difficult. He looked at me and he goes, wow, thanks. He goes, I have a part in this too. And anyway, it's about the project. And so we talked about the project and the changes he wanted to make. And I said, you know what, I'm fine with it. I'll trust you on that. And he got up, left. His staff got up and left, except for one woman. And she sat there and turned to me, and her jaw was just hanging. And she said, you know what? I've never seen anything like that in all my years of being in a corporation. She goes, that was fantastic. She said, it was just an inspiration to me to hear somebody say that. It's like, seriously? She goes, no. She goes, really, that's really rare. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Fast forward, I think it was the next week that I had a long-standing request with this group to do something. And a little out of the ordinary. I knew that to do this thing would require paperwork and writing a report, and it would cost money, and it was going to take some effort. But I'd asked this group to help me to do this. So one of the people in this group, he contacted me. He goes, "Hey Brian, that project we've been talking about? So why don't I come over and we'll talk about it?" And so he goes, "Let's walk around. We'll see where we can do this thing." And spent time with me and really listened to me. And he goes, "And by the way, that request that needs to be written, I'll take care of it." So, and so he went and wrote the report and filed it, sent me a copy, and had me approve it. Didn't have to do a thing. The week before, what happened? Did that make a difference? I don't know. I'd like to think so. But I feel like the attitude of the staff changed to me too. For me, it was talking to the person about my part and what I perceived as our problem. And for me to have a self-evaluation and talk to them about what I had discovered about myself. What I cared about was my being able to analyze myself and being able to share it with somebody else.
All right. What did you see? What did you notice?
He left himself vulnerable in front of one of his staff members of his staff members' whole team, which really kind of opened the door for them to really have some dialogue.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. I'll be honest, I don't think I would have done that. I think I would have gone down and seen that the group was all together, and I said, when you guys are done, can you and I chat for a minute? But there was a added value for everybody in him doing that in a public setting, because that positive ripple effect is sort of profound. Vulnerability. Gosh, that's a tough word, because you're absolutely right. There was a sense of him going out and saying something with the potential that it might not be reciprocated. We'll talk about that tomorrow. And to some extent, if the expectation is that it be reciprocated, or we operated in an inward or an outward mindset, right? So it's fun, these things get circulated. That's a great comment, you're absolutely right. What else? What else did you see there?
Jim kind of touched on it already, you know, I mean, once he did that and opened that up, you know, a lot more things got done. So, I mean, it was like a ripple effect or whatever, but like everybody else was coming outside of their box and helping each other.
Yeah. Were they more productive? Okay. See, this is also the big important thing. When it comes down to it, go back to the Alma Lolly, go back to Luis Francisconi. At the end of the day, an outward mindset is flat out more productive. If you're a business, you're more profitable. You have less turnover, your costs go down. If you're a nonprofit, the zeal, that intangible morale goes through the roof. It's real. It's not about soft stuff and making sure, is everybody, you're okay, I'm okay, you on board? It's productivity. It's real results. Yeah, I like that. You're absolutely right. So he goes through that. Now at the end, he kind of comes back with the, you know, and hey, you know, I mean, you wonder if you've been told, all right, guys, this is how you get out of more work. You just go and, I mean, you can see how easy it could be to start doing these things with a specific end in mind of reciprocity, or as soon as we begin to expect others to act in a certain way because of our graciousness or whatever else we call it, we move right back into being in the box and become manipulative again. And that's the profundity, the power behind the outward mindset. It's any activity, any action, any behavior can be done either inside the box or outside the box. All right. I'm seeing the late afternoon glaze. All right. Let's go. I think our time is just about done for the day. This is, I want to do a couple of things here. Actually, there's one more. No, I'm just kidding. All right. These are the invitations today before we come back tomorrow, okay? Number one, do what you identified to do for the person you've been thinking about. This is where it's either real, it's not. We're either committed or we're not, okay? And it's brought down to these very specific moments. This is one. Whatever it is that you decided and determined that you were going to do it, okay? And when you come back tomorrow, we'd like to hear about it as much as you're comfortable sharing. All right? So that's invitation number one. Invitation number two, for the rest of the day, which is 2 minutes, 4 o'clock, keep reminding yourself that each person you encounter is a person. Focus on outside triangle. It sounds so soft, but it's incredible what will start taking place in your mind as you leave here and you find yourself constantly reminding yourself that these are people, these are people, these are people. Focus on outside triangles. Anticipate it. Again, just for the sake of productivity and moving along and not winding myself into some crazed hysterics, I can choose what outside triangles to assume of somebody that cuts me off and swerves and speeds down the road, right? We talked about that earlier. You can choose. It's funny how often we automatically choose the one that's most damaging to us because it justifies our rage. Isn't that interesting? There's nothing that says that's the reason for it, yet we just choose to go there. And again, even if it is, they are rushing to the hospital. Who knows what that person's life is like? If they are so uptight about the fact they're actually going to serve and cut in front of them, what must that life be like to where they don't mind doing? I mean, you can go on and on. You can actually get to a point where you can just roll with that and not work yourself into a collusion or into a corrosive environment. Okay? So see people as people. All right? Focus on outside triangles. Number 3, act on what you learned in filling out your key objective map. Allow that tool. We won't really be looking at it tomorrow. This tool is now meant for you to begin to put into practice some of these things as it pertains to that particular objective that you highlighted. But reference it, reflect on it, think about the things that you can do to improve the situation and make yourself more successful. It's a recipe to knock that project out of the park. Okay? It's entirely up to you. All right.